Washington is promising to rally support to rebuild Gaza. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the region to help solidify a ceasefire between Palestinian militant group Hamas and Israel. Mr. Blinken has met Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. The Israeli leader has threatened a very powerful response if Hamas violates the truce and renews cross-border rocket strikes. The ceasefire, brokered by Egypt and coordinated with the United States, began after 11 days of the worst fighting that's seen in years. Mr. Blinken is due to visit Ramallah on the West Bank, as well as Egypt and Jordan, as part of his Middle East tour. Simon Marks joins us live now for more. Simon, Mr. Blinken says that international aid to rebuild Gaza shouldn't benefit Hamas. How's he going to ensure that?
Well, it's clearly going to be a problem, but the United States is arguing that it's going to do all of this in concert with the United Nations, that it sees the United Nations as being absolutely critical in terms of not just being a conduit for getting aid into Gaza. The Gaza Strip, of course, administered by Hamas, an organisation that the United States and the Europeans and, of course, Israel brand as a terrorist organisation. But also the Secretary of State and President Biden have made it clear over the last few days they don't want any of these supplies that are going to be provided as part of the humanitarian effort to fall into the hands of Hamas and in any fashion to replenish Hamas, certainly in military terms, but arguably in any kind of terms, given the threat that the Israelis and the US believe that Hamas continues to pose to Israel. So it is notable that the one place Secretary of State Antony Blinken will not be visiting on this trip is the Gaza Strip, because it is controlled by Hamas. It would be a security risk for him to go there, and the US government has a policy of not talking to Hamas. So it definitely creates difficulties that once again the Secretary of State, any Secretary of State, is talking only to Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, and therefore relying on their help and the help of third parties, the United Nations, the Egyptian government, to get American aid delivered to Gaza in an effort, the US says, to alter what it described the other day as years of neglect by the United States towards the Palestinians. That was a slap at the Trump administration.
Well, meantime, Simon, members of Congress have expressed unprecedented support for the Palestinian cause. Is this also a reflection of the Biden administration's stand?
Well, not of the Biden administration stance, but a reflection of the stance of left-wing Democrats, progressives within the party, who now occupy powerful positions up on Capitol Hill. There is, of course, the old socialist warhorse, Senator Bernie Sanders, threatening to block a $735 million weapons sale to Israel. But there are younger luminaries of the progressive wing of the party. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, for example. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Minnesota, of Michigan, who last week confronted President Biden on an airport tarmac and for 8 minutes engaged in a tense conversation with him, urging him to be more even-handed towards the Palestinian side. So the sands are shifting here in Washington, certainly on the left wing of the Democratic Party, as some of those people become more prominent politically in the United States. And that's going to be a pressure point for the Biden administration going forward, which even today, through the language that Secretary of State Antony Blinken used after meeting Prime Minister Netanyahu, pledged absolute support for the government of Israel.
Many thanks, Simon. Simon Marks there in Washington, D.C.